afternoon, and welcome to GFSI 2020 in Seattle. We're here live today with Melanie Neumann. Melanie is the Executive Vice President and General Counsel of Matrix Sciences. Hi Melanie, it's great to have you here today.
Hi Paul, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking some time. So, my name is Paul DeMarin. I'm with Perry Johnson Registrars Food Safety Incorporated. And today we're speaking with some industry experts around some hot topics in the industry. So the first one, we want to talk today about the role of evolving science and regulation in managing enterprise risk. And I thought just before we did that, maybe you could just give me a brief overview of Matrix.
Absolutely. Matrix Sciences is a very dynamic, growing company that is really striving to address some of the very unique demands of the food industry. So not only are we a food laboratory testing service with about 13 different labs across the country and in Canada, we do microchemical, analytical, sensory testing. We also have a very thriving risk management practice, which helps our clients with advice and counsel on some of these emerging risks that we're seeing, from coronavirus to just growing information around lack of sanitation controls, creating a lot of these types of outbreaks, harborage points, difficult to clean areas that are creating these recalls and so forth. So we're trying to create a holistic group that really can address from concept to commercialization any challenge our clients might have.
Mm-hmm. And your topic today references enterprise risk. Can you tell me what that means in the context of food safety?
Absolutely. I think as food safety professionals, we sometimes think that we're left to our own devices, and oftentimes our companies kind of sometimes really make us believe that. We have a limited budget. We have a very interesting purview to looking at hazards. We understand that LM, for example, listeria, is a hazard, but how do we turn the vocabulary around it to explain that that's a risk? And risks are relative in any organization. So within an enterprise risk management model, you may be competing against cybersecurity risks, marketing brand risks, outbreaks, recalls, but you also need some funds and some resources from a prevention perspective. So how do we change the conversation from technical experts knowing how to identify and manage a hazard to having a conversation around this is a risk to our organization and can actually quantify the risk of having a potential listeria outbreak based upon past data results. And this might be why we need to do more testing, why I might need more staff, more resources, why I might need a new piece of equipment. So a lot of this is around going to your C-suite with a different conversation in a vocabulary they understand to be able to get the kinds of support and resources you need.
Right. Oh, that's great. So you're a food lawyer by trade. You have a master's in food safety. How do your fields of law and science impact on this topic?
It's a unique question. I think I do have a very unique background in that a lot of clients and customers in the food industry are really struggling with some of the laws around, well, what happens if I do test? What happens if I do find something? If I really build a seek and destroy environmental monitoring and testing program, what am I going to do when I find a positive? Because it really needs to be structured to find and not to find. But then we compete against the concept of strict liability. If there is a defect in your control and product leaves your control and someone gets sick, you're responsible. No knowledge, no negligence required. So it's a real balance between what is my legal exposure and what is my duty to my consumer, my brand, my employees, in my company and my stakeholders to really try to seek and find and destroy potential issues before they become greater issues, like turning into a recall or an outbreak.
Yeah, and we're still today seeing a lot of that in the industry. It seems something new is coming up every single day.
It absolutely is, and that's really where the science part of my background comes into play is, again, for example, we can do some back of the napkin math to say, statistically speaking, we have a 90% chance that we're going to find a positive in the next year. So what are we going to do about it? How do we get ahead of it? How could we prevent it, for example? If your positives are always coming up in the same really difficult to clean niche in a piece of equipment, maybe it needs to be designed out, or maybe you need a different piece of equipment to be able to reduce that risk. But over time, you can do some calculations to say the return on investment is there.
Right.
And we avoid things like strict liability, things like plaintiff's attorneys who are very at the ready to jump on some of these cases that, despite our best efforts in the facility, we're doing the best we can. But sometimes bad things happen to you. You know, enterprise risk really is a way to identify a risk, put effective controls in place to manage risk, and then verify that it's working. But also doing that in the context of all the other risks in an organization and in an enterprise that they need to balance. So risk is relative, and we need to understand we're probably equally at risk of a cybersecurity attack. But how do we go have a conversation around quantification of risk? And that LM is a hazard, but the risk of a recall, the average recall costs $10 million, according to a lot of studies, that you can actually quantify. That's material balance sheet risk. That could make or break your company and make someone potentially file bankruptcy or close their doors or sell their company because they can't recover from a $10 million risk because of a hazard that some in the organization don't understand.
Well, that's very interesting. I know Matrix Sciences is a global leader in the industry, so we certainly appreciate your perspective on that. It's so important today. So I have one final question for you. What are a few tips that you would give to a food company who wanted to take some first steps towards exploring how to integrate its food program with an enterprise risk model?
Very good question. I think the first thing to do is sit down with your CFO, sit down with your risk manager, whoever really is responsible for identifying and driving all of the risks to your organization, to say, hey, where's food safety fit in? Does food safety fit in? And how comfortable are you if your answer is it doesn't, and you're a food company and you make food? How do you get to the table and start having the conversation with those that are really weighing the risk in the totality of the organization to say, food safety needs a seat at the table, and start to have that conversation. And then things like these quantifications, back of the napkin math, we can start to do that later once you develop a rapport with your C-suite.
Right. Well, that's good. Well, Melanie, I know we have a very busy day today, so thank you so much for your time. We very much appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a good conference.